The security guard reached Elena Marsh before she had time to register what was happening and tore the jacket halfway down her arm, trying to get it off her. The patch on the shoulder ripped at the seam. It was the last thing her husband ever gave her. 3 years dead, and that patch was the only piece of him she still got to wear in public. And now it was hanging by 4 threads from a stranger's fist, while 200 parents stood close enough to hear the fabric tear, and not one of them moved. Elena didn't fight him. She didn't raise her voice. She stood there with her arm half out of her own sleeve and watched her son's name come up fourth on the list. Watched him start walking toward the stage, with no idea his mother was being dragged backward across the grass behind him. Tyler Marsh kept walking toward the stage, eyes forward, certain this was the best moment of his life. 40 feet away, a woman named Carla Whitfield lowered her phone an inch and kept it pointed at Elena instead of the stage. She didn't say anything, she just kept recording. Stay with this one, because what 700 motorcycles did to a school parking lot 1 week later, nobody in Caldwell Springs, Oregon saw coming. Elena Marsh drove home with the torn jacket folded on the passenger seat like something that needed to be handled carefully. She didn't cry until she parked in her own driveway. Then she sat behind the wheel for 11 minutes and let it happen, both hands still on the wheel, the engine ticking as it cooled. Mark Doyle had given her that jacket 9 years ago, the week Tyler turned 9, the same week he rode in his first long-distance run with the Caldwell County Charter and came home smelling like diesel and rain. He'd had the patch made special, not the club's main colors, just a small memorial wing design he commissioned after losing a brother on the road 2 years before Elena ever met him. He told her it meant safe travels. He told her to wear it whenever she needed to feel like he was still around. 3 years ago, on a Tuesday in March, Mark didn't come home from a supply run. A truck crossed the center line outside Millbrook on Route 11. He was 41 years old. Elena kept the jacket in the closet for 8 months before she could put it on again. When she finally did, she wore it the way some people wear a wedding ring after they're widowed. Not for anyone else to see, just so she didn't feel like she was carrying the whole weight by herself. Tonight she had worn it for Tyler. For the one moment she'd promised herself she would stand in that crowd and feel Mark standing there too. She picked up her phone and called Carla Whitfield, the only number she had memory enough to dial through tears. "I have it," Carla said before Elena could ask. "I have all of it." "Don't post it," Elena said. "Not yet. Elena, I need to think." She hung up and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, the jacket across her lap, running her thumb along the torn seam the way you check a wound to see how bad it really is. To understand why a security guard felt confident enough to drag a grieving widow off a football field in front of 400 witnesses, you have to go back 6 weeks, to a conference room at Ridgemont High School with bad lighting and a coffee maker that hadn't worked since September. Diane Castellano had chaired the Caldwell Springs School Board for 5 years. She was 49 years old, sharp, organized, and ambitious in the careful way that people are ambitious when they've watched other people flame out from being obvious about it. The State Board of Education had an opening coming in November. She had already had 2 private conversations about it. She needed the district to look clean for 6 more months. Clean and controlled, and the kind of place a state appointment committee could point to without flinching. Marcus Ridley sat across from her that evening with a folder of printed news clippings he'd been collecting for 3 months. Ridley ran a real estate office on Main Street and led a parent group called Caldwell Families First, formed the year before after a minor vandalism incident at the middle school that had nothing to do with motorcycles, nothing to do with veterans, nothing to do with anyone's grief. But Ridley had decided somewhere along the way that the Caldwell County Charter, 34 years parked 2 blocks from the elementary school, was the kind of visible threat that made parents nervous on school tour days. "It's not about any one person," Ridley told her. "It's about what the patches represent. Parents see that ink, those vests, and they assume the worst. You can fix that perception with one clean policy." Castellano had pushed back, gently, the first time. By the 3rd meeting, she had stopped pushing back. Board Policy 412 was drafted in 12 days. It prohibited gang-affiliated apparel, insignia, or patches at all school functions, effective immediately. with graduation listed by name as the first event of enforcement. The language never mentioned the Caldwell County Charter directly. Everyone in that room knew exactly who it was written for. Principal Howard Greer read the draft on a Thursday afternoon and walked it down the hall to Castellano's office without an appointment. Greer had run Ridgemont High for 11 years. He'd had Mark Doyle's name on a guest list every fall for the Veterans Day Assembly, the year Mark came in and talked to senior government class about service and sacrifice without once mentioning the club on his vest. Greer set the policy draft on the desk and put one finger on it. "Diane," he said, "you understand who this actually hits." "It's a content-neutral dress policy," Castellano said. "Every district in the state has something like it." "Elena Marsh's husband is buried in the Veterans section at Caldwell Memorial," Greer said. "Her son is graduating in 6 weeks. You really want her photograph to be the one that goes with this story?" Castellano didn't answer that directly. She said the policy was already drafted, already reviewed by council, already scheduled for a vote. She said the optics were the optics, and the board had a job to do. Greer went back to his office and called the head of security, a man named Russell Pratt who had worked at Ridgemont for 6 years, and took instructions literally because nobody had ever taught him there was another way to take them. "If anyone shows up Friday in violation of 412, Greer told him, choosing his words with more care than he realized he'd need. "Speak to them quietly first. Give them the chance to step aside. Don't make a scene." He should have written that down and made Pratt repeat it back. Elena Marsh had spent 9 years learning the difference between the things she could fix and the things she just had to survive. She found out about Policy 412 from a printed letter mailed to every graduating family 2 weeks before the ceremony. 4 paragraphs of administrative language buried on page 2 of a packet about parking and cap and gown pickup times. She read it twice at her kitchen table and felt something cold settle into her stomach. She called the district office the next morning. A receptionist transferred her to a voicemail box that was already full. She drove to the school in person on her lunch break from the diner where she'd worked the line for 6 years. Principal Greer met her in the front office, his face already apologetic before she said a word. "I tried," he told her quietly. "I want you to know I tried." "Can I wear it or not?" Elena said. Greer looked at the floor for a moment. "The policy doesn't make an exception," he said. "I'm sorry, Elena. I really am." She thanked him for his honesty and drove back to work, with her hands tight on the wheel the whole way. That night, she sat Tyler down at the kitchen table and told him what the letter said. Tyler was 18, broad-shouldered like his father, with Mark's same habit of going quiet before he got angry instead of after. "Don't wear it then," he said. "I don't need you getting in trouble at my graduation, Mom." "I'm not going to let them tell me I can't carry your father with me," Elena said. "They're not telling you that. They're telling you not to wear a vest." "It's not the vest, Tyler. You know what it is." He did know. He'd watched her sleep in that jacket the first winter after the accident. On the nights the silence in the house got loud enough that she needed something with Mark's smell still caught in the seams. He didn't argue with her again. 2 days before graduation, Elena drove out to the Caldwell County Clubhouse on Route 9, the long gravel road she hadn't driven down in over a year, not since the anniversary of Mark's funeral. She found Wade Holloway in the garage, 63 years old, gray beard, forearms marked with 30 years of ink and sun, working on a carburetor, with the radio playing low. He looked up and set the wrench down the moment he saw her face. "Elena." "They passed a policy," she said. "No patches at graduation. They're calling it gang apparel." Holloway wiped his hands on a shop rag slowly, the way a man buys himself a few seconds to think before he says something he can't take back. "Mark's patch," he said. "Mark's patch." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked her the only question that mattered to him. "You still planning on wearing it?" "I have to," Elena said. "Tyler's been carried by this charter as much as he's been carried by me. Everybody at that ceremony is going to know exactly why I'm wearing it. I'm not hiding what his father was." Holloway nodded once, slow, like a decision settling into place. "Then you wear it," he said. "And if anybody puts a hand on you for it, you call me. Doesn't matter what time. Doesn't matter where I am." Elena didn't think she'd need to use that number. She was wrong by exactly 2 days. The night before graduation, Tyler drove out to Caldwell Memorial on his own, without telling his mother. He sat on the grass in front of his father's headstone for a long time, the way he did most years around this time, except this year he had something to say out loud instead of just thinking it. "They're trying to tell her she can't wear it," he said. "Like it's nothing. Like you're nothing." He pulled a folded photograph out of his jacket pocket. Mark Doyle, on the Caldwell County Clubhouse steps. 18-year-old Tyler had carried that photo since he was 12, and propped it against the base of the stone. "I'm not going to look down when they call my name," Tyler said. "I'm going to find her first. I don't care who's watching." He sat there until the sun went down behind the ridge, then drove home and didn't mention it to anyone. Friday night, 11 minutes after Russell Pratt pulled Elena Marsh off the football field, she sat in her kitchen and watched her phone light up with Carla Whitfield's name for the 4th time. She didn't answer it. Instead, she dialed a number she'd saved in her phone under one word, Wade, and listened to it ring twice before he picked up. "It's done," she said. "They pulled me off the field in front of everyone, tore the jacket." There was a silence on the line that lasted 3 full seconds. "Are you hurt?" Holloway said. "Not the kind you're asking about." "Did Tyler see it?" "No," Elena said, and her voice finally broke on the word. "He didn't see any of it. He doesn't know yet." "He's going to find out," Holloway said quietly. "Probably already has, knowing how fast these things travel now." He was right. By midnight, Carla Whitfield's video had 11,000 views. By 6 the next morning, it had 200,000. By noon, it had crossed 1 million, and a local news producer had left 2 voicemails, and Diane Castellano had gone on the morning broadcast in a cream blazer to explain, calmly, that Policy 412 had been enforced exactly as written, that security had acted appropriately, and that the district stood firmly behind protecting the dignity of the graduation ceremony for every family present. She used the word dignity 4 times in a 6-minute interview. Elena watched it standing in her own kitchen with the torn jacket draped over the back of a chair, and something in her chest went cold and still, the way it does when you finally see a thing for exactly what it is. Nobody on that screen was going to fix this for her. She knew that now, the way you know the weather just by stepping outside. She thought about the receptionist's full voicemail box. She thought about Greer's apologetic face and his empty hands. She thought about 34 years of a charter 2 blocks from the elementary school being called a threat by a man who had never once spoken to anyone who wore the patch. She picked up the phone and called Wade Holloway back. "What do you need from me?" he said. "I don't know yet," Elena said. "But Tyler needs to walk that stage again, the right way, with his mother standing there and nobody pulling her off the grass." "Then that's what we're going to get him," Holloway said. "Give me a week." The Caldwell Springs School Board held its next public session the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening, in a gymnasium chosen specifically because the regular meeting room only sat 60 people, and someone on staff had quietly warned Castellano that 60 seats would not be enough. They were right. It would not be enough by a margin of roughly 640. The first motorcycle arrived at the high school parking lot at 4 in the afternoon. By 5:30, there were over 100. By 6:45, the lot was full. The overflow lined along both sides of Cedar Street for nearly a mile. Engines off. Riders standing quietly beside their bikes in the early evening light. Local news helicopters circled twice and then settled into a holding pattern above the football field, the same field Elena Marsh had been dragged across 1 week earlier. 712 riders, by the count the county sheriff's department gave reporters afterward. The sheriff himself noted there had been 0 citations and 0 incidents. 712 people standing in formation around a public school, waiting. Diane Castellano arrived at 6:50 in a department SUV with 2 security officers, and felt her stomach drop the moment she saw the lot. Inside the gymnasium, Wade Holloway sat in the 3rd row, in full colors, Elena beside him with the torn jacket folded in her lap like evidence she had brought on purpose. Tyler sat on her other side, having insisted, the moment he learned the full story, that he wasn't missing this for anything. The meeting opened with routine business that nobody in that gymnasium had come to hear. Castellano moved through budget items for 11 minutes, while 700 riders waited outside in total silence, a silence that somehow felt louder than any chant could have been. Then Castellano reached the public comment period, and Wade Holloway stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need a microphone, though one was offered. "My name is Wade Holloway," he said. "I've run the Caldwell County Charter for 19 years. We've sponsored this school's Veterans Assembly for 11 of them. Mark Doyle, who's buried at Caldwell Memorial, spoke to senior classes about service for 6 years running before a truck took him off Route 11. His wife and son have been part of this community the whole time. Last Friday, your security pulled her off a football field and tore the one thing she had left of her husband off her body in front of 400 witnesses." He paused. The gymnasium had gone fully silent. "I'm not here to threaten anybody," Holloway said. "Every man and woman outside that door tonight is standing on public property, observing a public meeting, breaking no law. We're here because Elena Marsh asked her son's father's family to stand with her one more time. That's all this is." Castellano's hands were visibly unsteady on the podium. "Mr. Holloway, the policy was written to address legitimate safety concerns raised by who?" Holloway said. "Name one incident, one, in 34 years. Castellano didn't have one. She looked down at her papers and didn't find one there either, because there wasn't one to find." Marcus Ridley, seated near the front, tried to stand and speak in her defense, citing perception and optics and the responsibility of a school board to manage how a district was seen. Holloway let him finish without interruption. Then he asked one question. "Mr. Ridley, would you have written a policy banning grieving widows from wearing their husband's memory to their son's graduation if the husband had died in an accident wearing anything other than a vest?" Ridley had no answer for that either. Howard Greer stood up from his seat near the front, something he had never done at a board session in 11 years as principal. "I want it on the record," Greer said, "that I warned this board in writing about exactly this outcome before the policy was ever voted on. I was told the optics mattered more than the people. I'd like the minutes to reflect that I disagreed, and that I still do." Castellano didn't respond to that directly. She simply nodded, once, and made a note on the paper in front of her. Carla Whitfield rose next, her own daughter's diploma framed and hanging in her front hallway for exactly 1 week now. "I filmed it because nobody else moved," she said. 200 parents stood there and watched a security guard tear a widow's jacket, and not one of us said a word. I've thought about that every day since. I'm not proud of standing still. I'm telling you that tonight because somebody on this board needs to understand what silence looks like from the outside, since apparently nobody up there has had to live with it. Nobody in the gymnasium said anything for a moment after that. The board took a recess at 7:40. When Castellano came back into the gymnasium 20 minutes later, her composure had visibly cracked. She had spoken privately with Greer, with the district's legal counsel, and, briefly, through a cracked office door, with Wade Holloway himself, a conversation Howard Greer later described to a local reporter as the quietest and most honest exchange he'd witnessed in 5 years of board meetings. When Castellano returned to the podium, she didn't read from prepared notes. "I'm rescinding Policy 412 effective tonight," she said. "The board will issue a formal review of how it was passed and who it was actually designed to target. And Mrs. Marsh," her voice caught slightly, the first unscripted moment anyone in that room had seen from her in 5 years. "I owe you a personal apology. Not a statement, not a press release. An apology, in person, for what happened to you and your son." She walked down from the podium, across the gymnasium floor, past 7 rows of seated parents, and stopped in front of Elena Marsh. "I'm sorry," she said. "I let politics decide something that should have been about a mother and her son. I won't pretend that's a small thing. It isn't." Elena looked at her for a long moment. She didn't say it was fine, because it wasn't, and she had decided 3 days earlier that she wasn't going to pretend otherwise just to make the room more comfortable. "Tyler deserves to walk that stage the way every other kid did," Elena said, "with nobody touching his mother." "I know," Castellano said. "I already called Principal Greer. We're holding a second ceremony, on the same field, this Saturday. Your son walks first." Saturday came clear and warm, the kind of late spring afternoon that made the whole valley smell like cut grass. Tyler Marsh walked across the same stage where, 1 week earlier, his mother had been dragged off the grass behind him without him ever knowing. This time, Elena stood in the front row, wearing the jacket, the torn seam stitched back together by a tailor on Main Street, who had refused to take payment once she heard the story. When Tyler's name was called, he didn't look down at his shoes the way nervous 18-year-olds do. He looked straight at his mother, found her in the crowd in under 2 seconds, and pointed one finger at her the way his father used to point at her across a crowded clubhouse. A small private signal that meant, "I see you," before he ever walked up to take his diploma. He had told his father he would do exactly this, sitting alone on the grass at Caldwell Memorial the week everything fell apart, and he had kept his word. Howard Greer read the announcement himself, a small addition the school had approved without controversy. Tyler Marsh, graduating in honor of his father, Mark Doyle, United States Army veteran and member of the Caldwell County Charter. Wade Holloway stood at the edge of the field in his colors, arms crossed, saying nothing, the way men like him say the most by saying nothing at all. Diane Castellano did not attend a podium that day. She sat quietly in the audience, in plain clothes, 3 rows behind Elena, and watched the ceremony the same way every other parent did. 6 months later, a state ethics review of how Policy 412 had been drafted and enforced found that it had been adopted without proper legal review and had targeted a specific community group based on appearance rather than documented conduct. Diane Castellano withdrew her name from consideration for the state board seat before the review was even finished. She finished out her term on the Caldwell Springs board and did not run again. In a brief statement to the local paper, she said she had let pressure from a small group of vocal parents outweigh her responsibility to the families she actually served, and that she had learned, far too late for Elena Marsh's sake, that policies written to manage perception always end up costing someone real. Marcus Ridley's group quietly stopped meeting within the year. Russell Pratt completed a retraining program through the district and, by Principal Greer's account, became considerably more careful about the difference between a policy and a person standing in front of him. Elena Marsh still works the line at the same diner on Main Street. Tyler left for community college that fall, 2 towns over, close enough to come home most weekends. On the evenings he does, Wade Holloway is sometimes there too, fixing something in the garage, the radio on low, the way he's been there off and on since the week Mark didn't come home from Route 11. Elena kept the mended jacket. She doesn't wear it every day anymore. She wears it when she needs to. She thinks, sometimes, about the moment Tyler pointed at her from that stage instead of looking down, about how a boy learns, mostly by watching, what it means to stand your ground without raising your voice, and what it means to be the kind of family that shows up for each other, no matter how many people tell you to stay home. That was the whole lesson, in the end. The motorcycles were just the proof. The apology was just the paperwork. The real thing was a mother who refused to take off the last thing she had left of the man she loved, and a community that finally remembered dignity isn't something a policy gets to decide who deserves. Thank you for riding this one out with Heart Tales. If this story moved something in you, drop a comment below. We read every single one. Tell us, would you have worn the jacket? If you haven't subscribed yet, join the Heart Tales family. New stories every week, and they only get better from here. 2 more stories are waiting for you on the end screen right now. Pick one. We'll see you there. Disclaimer. This is a fictional story inspired by real themes of brotherhood, dignity, and justice. All characters, locations, and events depicted are entirely fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. This story is intended for entertainment purposes only.